A woman appeared at the park where Ethan was training his dog. Her daughter had vanished an hour ago. 6 years old, lost in the woods. The police couldn't find her. She'd heard Ethan used to be a K-9 officer. She begged him to help. His dog, Rex, could track anyone. Ethan agreed. "My dog can find your daughter. Just try to stay calm." How could he refuse? A missing child was a missing child. But as Rex followed the trail deeper into the forest, Ethan noticed something strange. The footprints were too clean, the signs too obvious, like someone wanted to be followed. Then his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, and everything he thought he knew came crashing down. The morning had started like every other morning in the 3 years since Sarah died. Ethan Mitchell woke at 5:30, checked the locks on the windows, and stood in the doorway of his daughter's room until he could hear her breathing. Lily was 7 now, old enough to sleep through the night without nightmares, but Ethan still checked. He always checked. Rex stirred from his spot at the foot of Lily's bed, tags jingling softly as he stretched. The German Shepherd had been Ethan's K-9 partner for 6 years before everything fell apart. Now he was just a retired dog who still remembered every command, every hand signal, every silent moment of communication that had once meant the difference between life and death. Ethan scratched behind Rex's ears, and the dog followed him into the kitchen. Coffee first, then the pill bottles lined up on the counter like small soldiers. Ethan had tried to stop taking them twice, but the nightmares came back worse each time. His therapist said, PTSD wasn't something you just got over. It was something you learned to live with, like a scar that ached when the weather changed. He swallowed the pills dry and stared out the kitchen window at the gray Seattle morning. November rain drummed against the glass in a rhythm that felt both familiar and suffocating. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely wide enough for one person to move through comfortably. The building was old enough that the heating pipes clanked at night, and the neighbors upstairs had loud arguments that filtered through the ceiling at unpredictable hours. But the rent was manageable on what Ethan made training dogs for private clients, and the elementary school was only 3 blocks away. Lily could walk there on sunny days. On days like this, Ethan drove her in the truck that needed new brakes and made a grinding sound that the mechanic said would cost more to fix than the truck was worth. He made oatmeal while Lily got dressed. She came into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and carrying her backpack, hair pulled into a ponytail that was slightly crooked. Ethan reached over and fixed it without saying anything. She smiled up at him, gap-toothed and trusting in a way that made his chest hurt. "Can I take my art project to school today?" she asked, "if you're careful with it." "I'm always careful." She wasn't. She was 7. But Ethan nodded anyway and helped her wrap the painting in newspaper. It was a picture of their family. 3 figures: Ethan, Lily, and Rex. No 4th figure. Lily had stopped including Sarah in her drawings about a year ago. Ethan's therapist said that was healthy. Ethan wasn't sure what healthy was supposed to feel like anymore. After dropping Lily at school, Ethan drove to Discovery Park for his morning training sessions. 2 clients today. The first was a woman with a rescue dog who lunged at other dogs on walks. The second was a teenage boy whose parents had bought him a puppy he didn't know how to control. Ethan had learned to keep his expectations low. Most people wanted a perfect dog without putting in the work to train one. He was working with the rescue dog when the woman appeared. She came across the grass with the kind of controlled urgency that made people step aside without realizing why. Expensive coat, good shoes, but her hair was coming loose from its clip and her eyes were red. Ethan saw all of this in the 3 seconds it took her to reach him. Habits. He'd spent 8 years reading people the way most people read books. "Are you Ethan Mitchell?" Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that sounded like breaking glass. "Yeah." Ethan handed the leash back to his client. "Give me a minute." The woman was already talking before his client had walked away. "My daughter is missing. She's 6 years old. She was on a field trip with her school, and she wandered off and they can't find her. The police are looking, but it's been over an hour, and she's just a little girl." And someone said, "You used to be a K-9 officer." Someone said, "Your dog could find anyone." Ethan looked at Rex, who had been lying in the grass but was now alert, watching the woman with the kind of focused intensity that meant he sensed something important was happening. "Where did she disappear?" "Here, in the park, near the North Trail. Please, I'll pay you whatever you want. Just, please help me find her." There were things Ethan should have asked. Which school? What was the girl wearing? Why the police hadn't brought their own K-9 units? But the woman was shaking, and her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white, and Ethan had a daughter the same age who he checked on every single morning just to make sure she was still breathing. So he said the words that would change everything. "My dog can find your daughter. Just try to stay calm." The woman's shoulders dropped half an inch. "Thank you. God. Thank you." Ethan grabbed Rex's tracking harness from the truck and fitted it over the dog's head and chest. Rex's whole body changed. He stood straighter, moved with purpose, became the working dog he'd been trained to be. Ethan had kept up Rex's training even after leaving the force, partly because it gave them both something to do, partly because he'd never fully believed he was done being a cop, no matter what the department psychologist had said about him being unfit for duty. "What's your daughter's name?" Ethan asked as they walked toward the North Trail. "Ava." The woman pulled a small pink jacket from her purse. "She was wearing this earlier. She took it off because she said she was too hot." Ethan held the jacket to Rex's nose. The dog inhaled deeply, processing scent information that Ethan would never be able to understand. Then Rex's head came up and his tail started to wag. He had it. He pulled forward, and Ethan let the leash play out, following as Rex moved into the trees at a steady trot. The woman followed behind them, her breathing too fast. Ethan glanced back once and saw her touching her coat pocket repeatedly, like she was checking for something. A phone, probably, waiting for a call, hoping the police would find Ava first so she wouldn't have to trust a stranger with a dog in the woods. The trail Rex followed didn't stay on the main path. He cut through the underbrush, nose to the ground, moving with the confidence of a dog who knew exactly where he was going. Ethan pushed aside branches and stepped over fallen logs, keeping one eye on Rex and one eye on the terrain. The park was over 500 acres. A 6-year-old girl could be anywhere. But something was off. Rex was moving too smoothly. The scent trail should have been more erratic if Ava had been lost and scared. Children didn't walk in straight lines when they were panicking. They zigzagged. They doubled back. They left messy, confused trails. This trail was almost deliberate, like someone had walked with purpose, knowing exactly where they were going. Ethan slowed. Rex kept pulling forward, but Ethan shortened the leash and made the dog heel. Behind him, the woman's footsteps crunched on dead leaves. "Why are we stopping?" Her voice was sharp now. He was following her. "He's following a scent." Ethan crouched down and looked at the ground. Small footprints in the mud. Child-sized, but too neat. Too evenly spaced. He stood up and turned to face the woman. "What's really going on here?" "What do you mean?" "My daughter is missing." "Your daughter walked away from a field trip in a very straight line through the woods. She didn't stop. She didn't wander. She didn't act like a lost 6-year-old. The woman's face did something complicated. Guilt, maybe. Or calculation. She opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket before she could speak. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. Unknown number. The message was short. "Looking for Ava? Let's talk about Sarah first." The words hit him like cold water. Sarah, his wife's name, his dead wife's name. No one was supposed to know about Sarah except the people who'd been there when it happened. No one was supposed to connect that part of his life to this moment in the woods, with a woman who'd lied about her daughter being lost. Ethan looked up at the woman. "Who are you?" She took a step back. "I'm just a mother looking for her daughter." "No." Ethan's voice came out flat and hard. "You're not. So I'm going to ask one more time. Who are you? And what the hell is really going on here?" The woman's composure cracked. Her hands came up like she was trying to ward off an attack. Okay. This was supposed to be a test, a hiring evaluation. My company needs someone with your skills, and I needed to see if you still had them. Ava is my daughter, but she's not actually lost. She's following a planned route. She's safe. A test. Ethan heard his own voice like it belonged to someone else. "You faked a missing child to test me." "I know how it sounds, but please just let me explain. My name is Victoria Clark. I run a security company and we handle high-stakes protective services, and I've been looking for someone with your background for months. Someone who can track, who can read situations, who can stay calm under pressure. I researched you. I know what happened with your wife. I know why you left the police force, and I'm sorry for deceiving you, but I needed to see if you could still do the job." The job, like Sarah dying in a car crash that wasn't really a crash, had been a job. Like the year Ethan spent trying to prove it was murder and being told he was losing his mind had been a job. Like walking away from the only career he'd ever wanted because no one would listen to him had been a job. "We're done here." Ethan turned and started walking back toward the main trail. "Wait," Victoria's voice rose. "Please. I'll pay you $50,000 just to finish the trail. Just show me what you can do. Then decide if you want the actual job." Ethan kept walking. Rex fell into step beside him, confused by the sudden change in direction but obedient as always. Behind them, Victoria was still talking, her words tumbling out fast and desperate. "I know this was wrong. I know I shouldn't have lied. But the job is real, and it's important, and people's lives depend on having someone good at this. Someone like you. Just finish the trail. Please." Ethan stopped. Not because of the money, though $50,000 would change everything. Not because of the job, though he missed having a purpose beyond survival. He stopped because Rex had started to growl. The dog was staring back the way they'd come, ears forward, body rigid. Ethan had seen Rex make that stance 100 times. It meant danger. It meant something was wrong. It meant the situation had changed in a way that required immediate attention. "What is it?" Victoria had gone quiet. Ethan held up a hand for silence. He listened. The park was never truly quiet. There were always birds, always the sound of wind in the trees, always the distant hum of the city beyond the woods. But now there was something else, a sound that didn't belong. Footsteps, running footsteps, and a voice calling out, high and frightened. "Mom! Mom!" Victoria's face went white. "That's Ava." The girl crashed through the underbrush 30 feet away, her face streaked with tears, her jacket torn. She saw Victoria and ran straight for her, sobbing. Victoria caught her and dropped to her knees, hands running over the child like she was checking for injuries. "Baby, what happened? You were supposed to stay on the path." There was a man. Ava's voice was thick with tears. "He said he was supposed to meet me, but he was scary, and I ran away, and I got lost, and I couldn't find the path anymore." Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. He looked at Victoria. "Who else knew about your test?" "Just my assistant, and my COO. No one else." "Then one of them isn't who you think they are." Ethan pulled out his phone and called 911. "Because someone just tried to take your daughter for real." The dispatcher answered, and Ethan gave her the details in the calm, professional voice he'd used 1,000 times before. Location: description of the suspect based on what Ava could remember through her panic. Request for immediate police response. The words came automatically, muscle memory from a life he'd thought was over. When he hung up, Victoria was still holding Ava, rocking her slightly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought this was safe. I thought you'd be safe." "She is safe." Ethan knelt down so he was at Ava's eye level. "Can you tell me what the man looked like?" Ava sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Tall. He had brown hair. And a scar." She touched her left cheek. "Here." Ethan felt the cold in his chest spread to his limbs. He knew that scar. He'd seen it 3 years ago in a department photograph. David Morrison, his old partner. The man who disappeared the day after Sarah's funeral. The man Ethan had been hunting for 3 years. The man everyone said had died or fled the country. The man who'd gotten away with murder because no one would believe Ethan's theory about brake lines being cut and bribes being paid. David was here. David had known about Victoria's test. David had used it to get to Ethan, and that meant everything was about to get worse. "We need to move." Ethan stood and pulled Victoria to her feet. "Now." "What?" "The police are coming. Not fast enough." Ethan was already walking, pulling Rex with him, trusting that Victoria would follow. That man knows these woods. He knows where we are. And if he's willing to grab a kid in broad daylight, he's not planning to let witnesses walk away. Victoria scooped Ava into her arms and started running. Ethan led them off the trail, cutting through the densest part of the underbrush, where Rex could navigate, but a full-grown man would have trouble moving quietly. He could hear sirens in the distance now, getting closer, but not close enough. Not nearly close enough. His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time the message was longer. 3 years, Ethan. 3 years I've been waiting. You destroyed my career, my reputation, my life. Now I'm going to destroy yours. Starting with everyone you try to protect. See you soon." Ethan deleted the message and kept moving. Behind him, he could hear Ava crying and Victoria trying to comfort her while running through trees and over roots. The sirens were louder now, maybe 2 minutes away. 1 minute if they were pushing it. Ethan just needed to keep everyone alive for 1 more minute. Rex stopped suddenly and growled again. This time Ethan saw why. A man stood 20 feet ahead, partially hidden behind a Douglas fir. Brown hair. Scar on his left cheek. David Morrison looked older than he had 3 years ago. Harder. Like he'd spent the intervening time becoming someone Ethan wouldn't recognize, except for that scar and the cold intelligence in his eyes that had once made him the best detective in the unit. "Hello, Ethan." David's voice was calm, almost friendly. "Been a long time." Ethan stepped in front of Victoria and Ava. "Let them go. This is between us." "Is it?" David tilted his head. "Because Victoria Clark's company was built on the ashes of the security contractor I used to work for. The one your wife was investigating when she died. Small world, isn't it?" Victoria made a sound behind him. Surprise, maybe. Or realization. Ethan didn't turn around to look. Sarah wasn't investigating anything. The lie came out smooth. He'd told it so many times it almost felt true. She died in an accident. We both know that's not true. She found my accounts. She found the bribes. She was going to expose everything. So I fixed the problem. David pulled a gun from his jacket. And now you're a problem too. You and Victoria, and her little test that gave me the perfect opportunity to finish what I started. The sirens were loud now, less than a minute away. Ethan could see the calculation in David's eyes. Not enough time to do this clean. Too much attention. Too many witnesses. But David had always been willing to take risks. That was what had made him dangerous as a cop, and even more dangerous now. Rex was coiled tight beside Ethan, waiting for a command. The dog had taken down suspects before. He knew what a drawn weapon meant, but David knew that too. He'd worked with K9 units. He'd know how to shoot a dog before it reached him. Ethan raised his hand slowly. You don't want to do this. There are police everywhere. You'll never make it out. Maybe. David's finger moved to the trigger. But you won't either. The shot never came. Rex lunged, not at David, but at Victoria, knocking her and Ava to the ground, behind a fallen log. Ethan threw himself sideways as the gun went off, the bullet passing through the space where his chest had been a second before. He hit the ground and rolled, coming up behind a tree as another shot splintered bark 3 inches from his head. Police voices shouted from multiple directions. David swore and fired once more, wildly, before turning and running deeper into the woods. Ethan started to follow, but hands grabbed his arm. Victoria. Her face smudged with dirt, Ava clutched to her chest. Don't. Please don't. Just let him go. Ethan looked at her, looked at the child, looked at Rex standing guard over both of them. Then he looked at the trees where David had disappeared and felt 3 years of rage and grief and obsession pulling him forward like a rope around his chest. He killed my wife. I know, and I'm sorry. But if you chase him now, you might not come back. And your daughter needs you more than you need revenge. The words hit harder than David's bullets would have. Lily, at school, waiting for him to pick her up, trusting that he'd be there because he was always there, because he'd promised he would always be there after Sarah died and left her with only one parent. Ethan let Victoria pull him down behind the log. A moment later, police swarmed the area. 6 officers with weapons drawn, spreading out to search the woods. One of them was Detective Martinez, Ethan's old partner from before David. Martinez saw Ethan, and his expression cycled through surprise, concern, and something that might have been relief. Mitchell, the hell are you doing here? Long story. Ethan stood up slowly, hands visible. David Morrison is in these woods. He's armed. He tried to kill us. Martinez went very still. Morrison, you sure? I'm sure. The detective pulled out his radio and started coordinating a wider search. Officers fanned out in pairs, Rex tracking with 2 of them because he still had David's scent. Victoria sat on the log with Ava, both of them wrapped in blankets that an EMT had provided. The little girl was calmer now, clutching a stuffed animal that had appeared from somewhere. Ethan sat down next to them. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline wearing off and leaving him hollow. This was how it always happened after. The shake, then the exhaustion, then the nightmares. I'm sorry. Victoria's voice was quiet. For all of this. For lying to you. For putting Ava in danger. For everything. You couldn't have known. I should have. I should have done better research. I should have been more careful. I should have. Her voice broke. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. The expensive coat was torn. Her carefully styled hair was full of leaves and dirt. She was shaking as hard as he was. But she'd kept moving through the woods, carrying her daughter, trusting a stranger to keep them alive. You did fine, he said. You're both safe. That's what matters. Ava looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Is the bad man going to come back? No. Ethan made his voice certain. The police are going to find him. And even if they don't, I won't let him hurt you. Promise. He shouldn't make promises he couldn't keep. He'd learned that lesson with Sarah. But Ava was 6 years old, and terrified, and looking at him like he was someone who could protect her from the world. So he nodded. Promise. Martinez came back an hour later with frustration written across his face. Lost him. He had an exit strategy. Car parked on the access road. Gone before we could seal the perimeter. Ethan had expected that. David had always been 3 steps ahead. He'll come back. Why? Because he's not finished. He could have run 3 years ago. He could have disappeared and never looked back. But he stayed close enough to watch me. close enough to know what I was doing. And now he's made his move. He won't stop until one of us is dead." Martinez ran a hand through his hair. "We'll put protection on you, and on Miss Clark and her daughter." Protection didn't save Sarah. Ethan stood up. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. "But there's another option." "What option?" "I find him first." Martinez looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "You're not a cop anymore, Mitchell. You can't just hunt someone down. Watch me." "Ethan." Victoria was standing now, too, still holding Ava. "There's a better way. Let me help you. My company has resources, investigators, analysts, tech support. We can find Morrison properly. Legally. Why would you help me? Because I owe you. Because my test put you in danger. Because..." She paused. "Because I built my company to do good, to protect people. And right now, you need protecting." Ethan studied her face. 3 hours ago, she'd been a stranger who'd lied to him. Now she was someone who'd trusted him with her daughter's life. The world had a strange sense of irony sometimes. "Okay," he said. "But we do this my way. What's your way?" "We use me as bait, draw Morrison out. And when he comes, we're ready." Martinez started to object, but Victoria spoke first. "What do you need?" What Ethan needed was his wife back, and his old life intact, and a world where 6-year-old girls didn't get used as bait for revenge plots. But none of that was possible. So he settled for the next best thing. "I need to go pick up my daughter from school." The principal's office at Lakewood Elementary smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. Ethan sat in one of those small chairs designed for parent-teacher conferences and waited while the receptionist called Lily's classroom. His hands had stopped shaking, but the hollow feeling hadn't gone away. It never really did. Lily appeared 5 minutes later, backpack bouncing against her spine, looking confused about why she was being pulled from class early. Then she saw Ethan and her face lit up. She ran to him, and he caught her, lifting her into a hug that probably lasted longer than it should have. She smelled like crayons and playground dust and the strawberry shampoo he'd bought last week because it was on sale. "Did something happen?" she asked when he finally put her down. "Yeah. But we're okay." He took her hand. "Come on. We're going somewhere safe for a little while." "Like where?" "Like a hotel. We're going to have an adventure." Lily frowned. She was too smart to be fooled by fake enthusiasm. "Is this about Mom?" Ethan stopped walking. They were in the hallway now, alone except for student artwork covering the walls. He knelt down so he was at her eye level. "What makes you say that?" "You always get quiet when you're thinking about Mom, and you check the windows at night, and you look at people like you're waiting for something bad to happen." She reached out and touched his face. "I'm 7, Dad. I notice things." God, she was so much like Sarah. Same direct way of cutting through nonsense to get to the truth. Same inability to let things go unspoken. Ethan took her hand and squeezed it. "Yeah," he said. "It's about Mom. But I'm going to fix it, okay?" "Okay." Then she hugged him again, quick and fierce. "I love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo." They picked up Rex from the park where Ethan had left the truck, then drove to a hotel that Victoria had suggested. It was the kind of place that had 24-hour security and required a key card to access the elevator. Victoria had paid for 3 rooms on the 8th floor, her and Ava in one, Ethan and Lily in another. The third was for 2 private security guards that Victoria's company provided. Former Marines, both of them. They introduced themselves as Cole and Martinez. Different Martinez, Ethan noted. The universe wasn't that coincidental. Lily thought the hotel was exciting until she realized they weren't going home that night. Then she got quiet and clingy. Ethan ordered room service and let her watch cartoons, while he sat by the window and watched the street below. Rex lay by the door, alert even in sleep. Good dog. There was a knock around 8 p.m. Ethan checked the peephole and saw Victoria standing in the hallway, alone. He opened the door. "Ava's asleep," she said. "Can we talk?" Ethan glanced back at Lily, who was absorbed in her show. "Give me a minute." He got Lily settled in bed with her stuffed rabbit and a nightlight, then stepped into the hallway. Victoria looked different in hotel lighting, less polished, more human. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater that looked comfortable rather than expensive. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said, about using yourself as bait. And it's dangerous, but it might work. Morrison wants you. If we make you visible enough, he'll come. That's the idea. But we need backup, real backup. I have people, good people, ex-military, ex-law enforcement. They can watch your back while you draw him out." Ethan leaned against the wall. "You're putting a lot of trust in someone you tried to scam with a fake missing child case." Victoria's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You're right. I am. But I'm a good judge of character when I'm not being an idiot about it. And I saw how you handled that situation today. You kept us alive. You stayed calm. You made smart choices. That's the kind of person I need working for me, and the kind of person I want on my side when things go wrong. Things are already wrong. Then let's make them right." She held out her hand. "Partners?" Ethan looked at her hand, looked at her face, saw determination there, and guilt, and something else that might have been respect. He thought about Sarah, about 3 years of dead ends and false leads, and slowly going insane while everyone told him to move on. About Lily growing up in a world where her father was always watching the windows, always waiting for the next attack. He took Victoria's hand. Partners. They spent the next 3 days planning. Victoria's company had resources Ethan hadn't imagined. Surveillance equipment, tactical support, database access that skirted the legal line, but never quite crossed it. They built a profile of David Morrison's last 3 years. Bank accounts he'd used under false names, properties he'd rented, people he'd contacted. The man had been careful, but not perfect. Everyone left traces. The trap they designed was simple. Ethan would go back to his normal routine. Walking Lily to school, training dogs in the park, being visible and vulnerable. Victoria's team would maintain invisible surveillance, waiting for David to make his move. When he did, they'd be ready. Martinez, the detective, wasn't happy about the plan. He wanted official police involvement, warrants, procedures. But David had disappeared before, and he'd do it again if he saw police presence. The only way to catch him was to make him think he had an advantage, to make him think Ethan was alone. On the 4th morning, Ethan took Lily to school with Rex at his side and 4 invisible security specialists covering every angle. Lily chattered about her art project and didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Good. That was good. She deserved normal, even if normal was an illusion built on surveillance cameras and concealed weapons. The attack came on the 5th day. Ethan was in Discovery Park with Rex, working with a client whose border collie had aggression issues. The morning was cold and clear. Ethan could see his breath in the air. He could also see the glint of sunlight off a scope from the tree line 200 yards away. He had about 3 seconds to react. Ethan shoved his client to the ground and dove sideways as the first shot took a chunk out of the tree where his head had been. Rex was already moving, trained instincts kicking in. The dog bolted toward the tree line, barking furiously. More shots. One of them caught Rex in the shoulder, and the dog yelped and went down. Ethan heard himself yell, heard Victoria's security team shouting into radios, saw Cole and Martinez, the ex-Marines, converging on the shooter's position from 2 different angles. Then he was running too, not away from the danger, but toward it, because Rex was down and bleeding, and 3 years of rage had just found a target. David was good, but he wasn't expecting a frontal assault. He was expecting Ethan to take cover, to wait for backup, to be smart. But Ethan wasn't being smart anymore. He was being angry, and angry was faster. He reached the tree line before David could reposition, saw the older man turning, saw the rifle coming around. Ethan didn't slow down. He hit David like a linebacker, driving his shoulder into the man's chest, taking them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs and dead leaves. The rifle went flying. David's fist connected with Ethan's jaw. Ethan returned the favor, feeling knuckles split against teeth. They rolled through the underbrush, grappling for advantage. David got an elbow into Ethan's ribs. Ethan got his forearm across David's throat and pressed down. The older man's face went red, then purple. His hands clawed at Ethan's arm but couldn't break the grip. "She didn't have to die." Ethan heard his own voice like it was coming from underwater. "Sarah didn't have to die." David's eyes were starting to glaze. Then Cole and Martinez arrived, pulling Ethan off, holding him back while David gasped for air. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Martinez, the detective, was there too, handcuffs already out. Ethan stopped fighting against Cole's grip, stopped trying to go back and finish what he'd started, because Lily was waiting for him to pick her up from school, and Rex was bleeding somewhere in the grass. And Sarah was still dead, no matter how hard Ethan pressed his forearm into David Morrison's throat. They arrested David on attempted murder, kidnapping, and a list of other charges that would keep him in prison for decades. They found evidence in his apartment connecting him to Sarah's death, brake fluid on his clothes, photos of Sarah's car, bank statements showing payments from the security contractor she'd been investigating. Everything Ethan had said 3 years ago was true. Everything the department had dismissed as grief-induced paranoia was real. Martinez apologized. The police chief apologized. The department psychologist who'd signed off on Ethan's forced leave apologized. It didn't bring Sarah back. It didn't give Ethan the 3 years he'd lost. But it meant something. It meant he hadn't been crazy. It meant his instincts had been right all along. Rex survived. The bullet had gone through muscle and missed anything vital. The vet said he'd be fine in 6 weeks. Maybe a limp for the rest of his life, but fine. Ethan sat with the dog for 3 hours while they sedated him and stitched him up and administered antibiotics. He scratched behind Rex's ears and told him he was a good dog. The best dog. Rex's tail thumped weakly against the examination table. Victoria paid the vet bill without being asked. She also offered Ethan the job for real this time. No tests, no deception, just a straightforward offer to run her personal security division for more money than Ethan had made in his entire career as a cop. He said he'd think about it. He went home that night to the small apartment with the noisy pipes and took Lily to dinner at the pizza place down the street. She ordered pepperoni and picked off half the toppings. He ordered plain cheese and listened to her talk about school and friends and all the normal 7-year-old concerns that had nothing to do with shootings or revenge or dead wives. "Dad?" she asked while they were waiting for the check. "Are we safe now?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. She had Sarah's eyes, Sarah's way of asking questions that cut straight to the heart of things. He wanted to tell her yes. He wanted to tell her the bad man was gone and everything would be fine, and she never had to worry again. Instead, he said, "I'll always keep you safe. No matter what." That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She thought about that for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay. A week later, Ethan called Victoria and accepted the job. Not because of the money, though that helped. Not because he needed something to do, though he did. He accepted because she'd trusted him with her daughter's life, when she had no reason to trust him with anything. Because she'd stood behind a tree in the woods and held Ava and told Ethan not to chase David, because Lily needed him more than he needed revenge. Because she understood something about loss and fear and fighting through it anyway. His first day at Clairtech Security Solutions was strange. He had an office with a door and a window and a nameplate that said, Director of Personal Protection. He had a team of 6 specialists reporting to him. He had a salary that meant Lily could go to a better school, and they could move to an apartment without noisy pipes, and he could afford the good coffee instead of the cheap instant kind. Victoria stopped by his office in the afternoon. "How's it feel?" "Weird." "Good weird? Or bad?" "Weird." "Not sure yet." Ethan looked around the office. "I keep expecting someone to tell me I don't belong here." "You belong here." Victoria sat down across from him. "You saved my daughter's life. You caught the man who killed your wife. You did all of that while keeping your own daughter safe and sane. If anyone belongs here, it's you." "About your daughter." Ethan pulled out a file from his desk drawer. "I did some digging. Your COO, Richard Thornton, has been embezzling from the company for 18 months. He's also the one who told David about your test." He thought David was just a private investigator doing background checks. Didn't realize he was working with a murderer. Victoria's face went very still. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. How did you find this in 1 week?" "I'm good at my job." Ethan closed the file. "Question is, what do you want to do about it?" Victoria stood up and looked out the window. Below them, Seattle sprawled in all directions. Gray sky, gray buildings, gray water in the distance. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to fire him, prosecute him, make sure everyone knows what he did. But first, I want to thank you for finding this, for trusting me, for taking this job." "You're welcome." She turned back to face him. "I know I started this wrong. The fake missing child, the lies, all of it. But I want to do better. I want this company to be what it should have been 3 years ago. A place that actually protects people instead of covering for corruption. Will you help me build that?" Ethan thought about Sarah, about her investigation and her death, and the 3 years he'd spent trying to prove something everyone said was impossible to prove. About Lily growing up with a father who had a purpose beyond survival. About Rex limping around the new apartment, but still wagging his tail when Ethan came home. "Yeah," he said. "I'll help." 6 months later, Ethan stood in the park, where it had all started, and threw a tennis ball for Rex. The dog still limped, but he could run. He could track. He could do all the things that made him who he was. Lily was at a birthday party with a girl from her new school. The apartment they lived in now had reliable heat and quiet neighbors, and enough space for Lily to have art supplies spread across her bedroom floor. Victoria had become something like a friend. She and Ava came over for dinner sometimes. The girls played while the adults talked about work and life and all the complicated things that happened when you tried to move forward from trauma. It wasn't romance. Neither of them was ready for that, and maybe never would be. But it was connection. It was trust. It was evidence that broken things could be rebuilt into something different, but still whole. David Morrison was in prison. Richard Thornton was in prison. Claire Tech Security Solutions had cleaned house and was now actually doing the work it claimed to do. Ethan's team had protected 3 corporate whistleblowers, 2 witnesses in federal cases, and 1 journalist who'd uncovered a trafficking ring. Good work. Work that mattered. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Emergency at the office. Can you come in?" He texted back. "On my way." Rex brought back the tennis ball and dropped it at Ethan's feet, tail wagging. Ethan scratched the dog's head and looked around the park. 6 months ago, he'd been here training a client when a woman appeared and told him her daughter was missing. 6 months ago, he'd said, "My dog can find your daughter," and set in motion a chain of events that had broken everything open, and then, slowly, painfully, put it back together. The world was still gray. Seattle was still Seattle. But Ethan wasn't checking windows at night anymore. Wasn't waiting for the next attack. He was sleeping. He was eating. He was laughing at Lily's jokes and making plans that extended beyond the next 24 hours. He was living instead of just surviving. Rex barked once, impatient for another throw. Ethan smiled and threw the ball. The dog took off after it, limping but determined, just like Ethan, just like Victoria, just like everyone who'd been broken and decided to keep going anyway. He got in his truck and drove toward the office. There would be another emergency, another crisis, another person who needed protection. That was the job now, not revenge, not proving everyone wrong, just showing up and doing the work and trusting that it mattered. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. "Dad, the party's over. Can you pick me up?" Ethan checked the time. He could handle Victoria's emergency and still make it to pick up Lily. He'd promised he would always be there, and for the first time in 3 years, he believed he could keep that promise. He texted Victoria, "Need 30 minutes. Then I'm all yours." Her reply was immediate. "Take your time. We'll manage." Ethan drove to the birthday party house and found Lily on the front steps with her backpack and a goodie bag. She climbed into the truck and buckled herself in, talking a mile a minute about cake and games, and her new friend Madison, who was really good at drawing horses. "How was work?" she asked when she finally paused for breath. "Work was fine. How was the party?" "Really fun. Can Madison come over next week?" "Sure." They stopped at a red light. A woman was crossing the street with a small child holding her hand. The child looked up at the woman with complete trust. The woman looked down at the child with careful attention. They were connected in a way that transcended words. Parent and child, protector and protected. The foundation of everything that mattered. The light turned green. Ethan drove toward the office with Lily chattering beside him and Rex asleep in the back seat. He still thought about Sarah, probably always would. But the memory didn't hurt the same way anymore. It was softer now, more bittersweet than sharp. She would have liked Victoria, would have approved of the job, the new apartment, the way Lily was thriving. Would have told Ethan it was about time he stopped punishing himself for surviving. At the office, Victoria was waiting in the conference room with her laptop open and a familiar expression of controlled stress on her face. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where someone's threatening to kill a federal judge unless we figure out who's trying to kill them first." She turned the laptop so Ethan could see the screen. "Interested?" Ethan looked at the case details, looked at Lily, who had settled into a chair with her coloring book, looked at Victoria, who was watching him with expectation and trust. He thought about David Morrison in prison, about Sarah getting justice, about Rex limping but alive, about all the ways the world could break you if you let it. Then he said, "Yeah, I'm interested." And somewhere in the gray Seattle afternoon, a tennis ball sat forgotten in the grass where a dog had dropped it. But that was okay. There would be other games of fetch, other mornings in the park. Other moments of simple joy between the emergencies. That was what life was now. Not the absence of danger, not the guarantee of safety. Just the choice to keep going, to keep protecting, to keep showing up for the people who needed you, to keep living instead of just surviving. And in the end, that was enough.